welcome back to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. And this week, we have Barbara Clarke Ruiz, an entrepreneur who started her career as a designer. And today we're going to talk about the company she's founded and what it's been like making the transition from designer to entrepreneur. Barbara, can you do a better job than I did with your intro, please?
Thank you so much, Jerry. It's so great to be here.
Great to have you.
So yes, I have spent my last 20 plus years as an activewear design consultant. So I was hired right out of college by Adidas, and it's actually pronounced, so we know it is Adidas in the States, but it's actually pronounced Adidas because it's someone's name. It's Adi Dassler. So a lot of people don't know that, especially Americans. I think Run DMC completely ruined us. But it's really pronounced Adidas. So in any event, so when I was in college and I had my senior show, when you're in fashion school, you have a senior show, and there are critics that come from different companies. And so your hope is that you can land a job. So I actually landed 2 opportunities. One was with Ralph Lauren and one was with Adidas. Now, I had no interest in working with Adidas, but Ralph Lauren wasn't paying any money, so I followed the money. And I'm so glad I did. So so my whole ammo was, I'm not going to move back home to Virginia. Whatever that took, I was not moving back home. And so I ended up taking the position at Adidas. I wasn't going to be a design assistant. I was going to be a designer, boys 8 to 20. And I went through, 4 years of college designing men's, a little bit of designing women's, a little bit of men's, but no kids. But I'm like, I don't even care. So I ended up taking the position, completely and utterly fell in love with activewear. And I started to design a lot of products that was making a lot of volume for the company. And so about a year and a half, 18 months into that, my boss came to me and he said, "Hey, Barb, we're closing this office." It was in New Jersey, Warren, New Jersey, and we're moving it to Fontainebleau, France. I'm like, France? And all I could think about, oh my gosh, now I got to go find another job. But he said, there's a design position there if you want it. And I'm like, wait a second, I failed French with a 69. I didn't even care for my French teacher. I think I might have, given her the finger like when she failed me with a 69. But nonetheless, so I came home. I told my husband we had just gotten married. He was like, "Let's go." And I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, let's go." So we ended up going. We moved there with 4 other Americans, and we lived in this incredible this incredible hotel that was across the street from the mansion that Napoleon bought Josephine as a wedding gift. So that's what I looked at every day, this incredible castle, right? But so I worked there in our office, and we had the coolest office ever. Adidas had renovated the horse stables of a chateau and where they filmed a lot of movies. And so we had a private chef that cooked for us every day. We also had a swimming pool and a tennis court. And so when you open up the room for, the design room, there was like these big horse stables. But when you open it up, you could see like this picturesque castle where they film movies. And so sometimes during lunch, we'd take blankets and go sit on the lawn, and the chef would bring us our lunch while we watched them film a movie. It was amazing. And so
fairy tale.
It was very cool. Like I couldn't even make that up. It was a very cool experience. And then that office closed about 2 years later. And so my husband said, "Yeah, I'm going to go back to the States." And I'm like, "All right, great. I'm going to go to Germany. I'll finish my collection, and I'll come home and figure out life." And then prior to leaving, my boss said to me, "Hey, Barb, why don't you stay as a consultant?" And I'm like, "Well, what do they do?" And he said, "Well, you just come to Germany, once a month." It was, Herzogenaurach, Germany, once a month, and you can continue to design your collections, and everything stays the same. And I'm like, why isn't everybody a consultant? Like I was just ready. I was just ready for the ball to drop. I just knew it was not going to be as exciting as I thought had I anticipated, but it was. And I went to I traveled back and forth to Germany for 5 years, designing collections for them. At one point, I was given the opportunity to have my own collection that I could design whatever I wanted, which was really cool. So I created a collection called Trefoil, which was the early version of Ivy Park, right? So it was jeans with 3 stripes and dresses. It was like all the cool things that Adidas wasn't doing at that time, right? And so it performed very well. And so they decided, hey, let's put some footwear to this. So we added footwear the following season. And then it just kind of continued to snowball until it became the incubator for the Adidas Original stores. So I thought that was just a really, fun fact that I had a little something to do with the original stores. In any event, so after I was tired of traveling, I had my daughter, I was pregnant, and I said, I don't want to travel anymore. I just want to work for domestic companies. And then probably 2 weeks into that theory, one of my old product managers contacted me and he said, hey, Barb, I'm heading up apparel at Fila and I want you to come and work with me. And I'm like, I am not moving to Italy. I mean, look, that's not the worst thing that could happen, but I'm like, I'm not moving to Italy. So he said, no, just come over once a month. And I'm like, okay. So I did that for 2.5 years and pretty much the same thing, from Adidas. So, and then after I was done with that, I'm like, okay, now I'm really, really not going to travel. I just want to sit down for a minute. And so, then I just started to work for, still European companies, but I went to work for Nike, New Balance, Asics, Zogs, Disney, Speedo, Jockey, the NBA. I was design director for Walmart 6 activewear divisions. We did about $750 million a season. I was guest designer for Kohl's. I worked with Venus Williams, the tennis player Venus Williams, of course. I helped her to reboot her brand 11 by Venus. So I worked with V for like 4.5 years. And then it was with her that I had this grandiose idea to start a dog treat brand. So, and the reason why I started that dog treat brand was because my dogs just couldn't eat store-bought food and treats. So I would cook for them. And one day I said, you know what? I'm going to start a dog treat brand one day. Seriously, not really believing myself. I figured, let me just put it on the list because I have lists of companies that I want to start or brands I want to start. So I said to Venus, I said, I'm thinking about starting a dog treat brand. She said, you should do it, Barb. Just surround yourself with really smart people. She said, that's what I do. And I said, but you can afford smart people like me. I'm going to go to YouTube University. Like, that's what I got. So
Spent a lot of time
like
at that university.
I spent a year at the university just learning about, the pet space and dog treats and all that kind of stuff. And really just understanding, how do I take my skill set of what I've done for these global brands and parlay that into a dog treat brand, and it starts with like the marketing and how are you going to tell that story and what is your packaging going to look like? And more importantly, what is that product going to be? And so I had to figure all of that out and I had to source all the products and, and pet suppliers, they don't want to sell you like 30 pounds of dog treats. They want to sell you like 30,000 pounds of dog treats. And so I literally had to beg my supplier. I'm like, can you just give me a chance? I know I can do this. He was like, here's an NDA, sign it. And I'm like, okay. So, yes, this company, they've been my supplier ever since I started, and dogs absolutely love this product. And that, and actually COVID was very good to us because during COVID, Amazon decided that we were one of the 6 categories that they were going to prioritize, right? So dog treats and dog food was one of the essential products. And so our ranking went from like 170,000, it meant it was 170,000 companies ahead of us, to like 15,000 in the course of like a few weeks. So we were going crazy with trying to keep up with all of these dog treats. And, we're still trying to figure out how to keep up. And, with the demand, because there's so many opportunities. And now we're in the top 2% of dog treats on Amazon. And, so it's like COVID was kind to us. And, prior to COVID, we were the pet amenity for 8 Kimpton hotels. We won best dog treat with our Nutter Doodles. So this is our packaging.
Nice.
Look, you silly. So we have about 6 products. I said, let me just keep it small. Let me keep it focused. And, and so that's kind of how it went. So I've done I've worked with a company in which I've done sales. I got them in a Walmart. I got them about $40 million in business. I also worked with a company in which took the whole company apart. It was a small company, so I took it all apart. It was an apparel brand, and put it all back together with new fabrics and new fits and new packaging and new factories and all of the above. And so about 2 years after that, the company got acquired. So yeah, I'm I'm looking for new clients as we speak, but I focus on my dog treat brand when I'm between clients. And we're about to do a crowdfunding campaign, which I'm completely excited about, because with all these opportunities on the table, I'm like, it finally puts us in a position that we can really scale in a major way.
So first of all, that's a ton I want to unpack. So I've got a million questions. But
Sure.
before I get to that, have you gotten a link for your crowdfunding campaign yet, or is that not yet?
No, but it should be coming in another day or so.
Okay, so this episode will drop after that. So make sure you get me that link to include.
Oh,
Okay.
fantastic.
Yeah, so that way
Yes,
we
I
can
would
get
love
your
that.
link in there as well. So there's a lot of things you said. One, I want to make a comment, and then the rest are questions. At the very beginning, you'd said you went chasing the money, and I'm glad it worked out for you. But for anybody listening, that's not normally the best choice. Normally, chasing money is short term. It worked out for Barbara, and that's awesome. But be careful of
Yeah.
that. um,
Yes. Yes.
but I really want to talk about that. I really loved about your journey. First of all, it really does sound like a fairy tale. So I'm so glad you're blessed like that. It's wonderful. But you followed a path that I see a lot. Now, actually, I followed the exact same path: employee, consultant, entrepreneur. Um, and I have two questions based on that observation. The first is, do you feel being a consultant help you to prepare for being an entrepreneur? And then second, um, from an emotional perspective, how is being a consultant different from being an employee? And how is an entrepreneur, if any, different from being a consultant?
So, okay. So being a consultant, well, I honestly, I've really only had one job in my entire career, and that was working for Adidas. And then I became a
Yes.
consultant. Um, so I mean, for me, it's always a retainer. Like, companies put me on a retainer. Like, I don't work for two or three companies at one time. I work for one company at one time because of, when you're in that creative genre, that creative space. I don't ever want to be designing with two companies that could potentially be a competitor,
Competitor, yeah.
and I'm giving them similar products. So I kind of do that to kind of keep myself out of any legal hot water. And then companies are really protective too. They don't want you to be designing for their competitors, you know, um, at the same time. So yeah, I steer clear of that. I mean, I think the difference between, being a consultant and being an in-house designer is, I mean, I figure like it's a few different things, right? So when I'm a consultant, and I'm a solopreneur, right? So I spend a lot of time, alone designing, which I like it.
Mhm.
But I also like being with people, when it's necessary. I don't have a problem with that. But you don't have, I feel like I'm a lot more productive as a consultant versus in-house, because I remember, when I was working with this company in the city, I was in their office. I spent so much time in meetings. I'm like, when do you guys get work done? Like, there's just so many meetings. There's a meeting to figure out when we're going to have a meeting. Like, there's just so many meetings. And so I didn't feel like I'm as productive. But when I'm working solo and I understand, what the objective is for a particular client, I can really drill down and get super focused on what that is. And I think that's how I do my best work.
That
Um,
makes sense.
I mean, I don't get the perks of, insurance. I'm married, so I get that through my husband, but, I don't get the bonuses. I don't get, a lot of the benefits of being, a full-time employee. but I like the freedom. So it's almost like, there are some people who go to work every day and they have great packages and they have great salaries, and that's all well and good, but they're so unhappy. So when you talk about, what's the trade-off? Do you want to make a little less or not make as much? When I say not make as much, I mean consultants make more money, but we don't get those other perks like bonuses. Maybe some consultants do. I got a bonus from Adidas, but aside from that, I don't get necessarily bonuses. But I charge a fee where I don't necessarily need to get a bonus because it's really just baked in. So but aside from that, I'm happy. I'm excited to wake up every day. I'm happy and excited to wake up every day just because I love what I do. And I feel really blessed to be able to, you know, uh, have restless nights because my brain is churning because I'm so excited about getting up the next day and, sitting down and sketching or researching or shopping the market. Like I just have a super fun job. And even with my dog trees, I mean, I love dogs. So, when I'm planning initiatives, with, shelters, or even the initiative I'm working on now, I'm actually working on a television pitch for a reality show for around my dog treat brand. So I'm actually building out this pitch. So that's really fun is to sit down and put that together because I've never done it. And just figuring it out and figuring out, who's the team that I want to have work on this with me. All of that is really considered fun for me.
That's awesome. And before we dig more into the business, you said something. I think I know I've been asked a lot, and I imagine you have as well. People ask, is it better to be an employee or a consultant or an entrepreneur? And when I answer the question, I say there's not a better. It's what's better for you. For some people, their
Yeah,
emotional
you're right.
makeup is being an employee. They like that stability. For others, it's being a consultant. They like the variety. And for still others, it's being an entrepreneur and having all that potential and so much control in your hands. But you take that person from category one and put them in category three, and they're miserable. Have you
Yeah.
found
I
that to be the
mean,
case?
look, yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. It
Mm.
just isn't, right? We eat what we kill.
Yes.
When you're an employee, you're going to get that check every 2 weeks, no matter what, right? I mean, you have no control over your destiny, though. You can get that check for 2 weeks, but if that employee decided they wanted to let you go, there's a safety net. You can get a package, but you got to figure out what is that next going to be. I mean, I feel like the benefit of being a entrepreneur or even a consultant. Well, for me, I'm a consultant and an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And so I feel like I have the best of both worlds, where I get to consult with a company and, make a, a good wage. And then in between clients, that's when I work on my dog treat brand because I know that there's always a client that's going to come at some point. So I just use that time because typically when I have a client, I don't have time to work on my dog treat brand. I just have time to ship product and that's it. Like there's no marketing, there's no creativity that goes into coming up with new ideas and concepts and, researching, none of that. I don't have time for any of that. So, you know, um, but I feel like to your point, it's a personal choice. Like some people, I think when you get to be a certain age, you've been in the industry for 20 something years and you're like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And they start figuring out like how do I transition out of this and still be able to maintain my livelihood. So, I think that there are some people that it works for, and I think there's some people that it doesn't. And, I've had a number of people that said, they tried entrepreneurship, but they needed to be in the office. They liked the idea of getting dressed up and going into Manhattan. That made them happy. That doesn't make me happy. If I can hang out at home in my sweatpants and my hair in a ponytail and work on and just be creative, that's my happy place. So I think you're right. It just depends on whatever it is that you need.
Yeah. And what I like about making the transition from employee to consultant to entrepreneur, at least in my experience, was you again, this is my experience. I'm not saying it's a universal truth, but I learned things becoming a consultant that I didn't know as an employee. And some of those things really helped me when I started my first company. So for me, it was almost like, for me, consulting was almost like being an entrepreneur with training wheels on. And then when I became an
That is true.
entrepreneur, I took the training wheels off.
Yeah, I agree with that. The way I transitioned into being a consultant, I transitioned from a full-time position.
Mhm.
And and you're right. At that time, I mean, to be able to transition with a company of that magnitude and be able to slowly move into, the consultancy and, having the relationships that I built, when we lived in France. A lot of the people who lived in France didn't go to Germany. They went on to work for other companies. So they called me when they went to other companies. And so that was how I have been able to, continue to stay in this business for so long. It was just due to relationships and people just calling on me knowing that if I came to work for their company, you know I'm going to make them look good. I'm going to create great products that are going to sell well. So it was like a win-win, and they just knew. So you know yeah, I didn't, I kept the training wheels on for a long time, and then until I think COVID. I think it was a shift for me in COVID because, a lot of retailers, started going out of business. The fashion industry isn't what it used to be. And so that's when it really became a little tougher for me to be able to transition quickly to find new clients because I'm in the process now. I'm looking for new clients, right? So I typically don't really look, they come to me. Well, they still come to me, but now I'm like, doing outreach and things of that nature. But I feel like with all of the retail, retailers closing, fashion is different. It's just very different now. And I think also too, like, I talk to a lot of companies and, they're like, oh my gosh, Barb, your experience is bananas. And I'm like, great, want to work together? You're a little overqualified,
Yeah.
which is funny. But I'm like, but wait, but I do a lot of things. Maybe you
Yeah.
don't have to hire three people. Maybe you could just hire, me so I can do the stuff that three people do.
Yeah.
So
Overqualified.
now,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah. No, no, no. So now I'm looking to see how I can transition a little bit out of fashion into maybe the tech space. I'd love to go and work with a company where I could utilize, my overarching experience of being a consultant, a designer, entrepreneur, and understanding all of the stuff in between in terms of, how to build a brand, how to run a division with no money, with little money, so I think there's some value in that. So I just need to connect with the right company that sees that.
Yeah. It's, you said a couple of things that are really interesting. The overqualified feedback is such a tough one because in some instances it's just a way to hide ageism. Neither of us are 20 anymore, and sometimes people will use overqualified as a way to ditch folks. But on the other side of it, assuming truthfulness and they're being legitimate, I have managed people that are dramatically more qualified for the role, and it's always a bear because the person comes in excited and 2 weeks later they're like, oh my gosh, this was me 5 years ago and I'm so bored right now. And then they become hard to manage
Oh.
because they're bored. So I can appreciate some truth, but I get so leery these days that it just becomes more and more as a, a feedback tool to hide ageism.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it could
what
be.
would you think you learned most starting your well, actually, two-part question. What do you think is the biggest learning that you had in starting your pet treat brand? Number one, and number two, um, you've used the word brand instead of company. Is that just habit from being in the fashion industry, or are you running something and outsourcing the majority of the company part?
No, it's, I think of it brand, you know. I don't know why I don't think of it as a company. I think of it as a brand. I think because the umbrella, Lick Your Silly is under an umbrella company called Ayala Product Group because I have other companies. I have other brands that I'd like to create under that umbrella. So I think that's why I refer to Lick You Silly as a brand.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're wrong. I just want to
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. I just refer to it as a brand.
Yeah.
I mean, in fashion, that's what when you're talking about apparel, it's, it's typically around, a specific brand. So I think it's probably just habit.
Yeah, that's what I wasn't sure about. So you mentioned you have other brands underneath that company. Do you want to talk about those, or is that?
Well, one of them it's almost ready to go. It's another consumer product that I'm planning on launching before the Christmas holidays. And the
Exciting.
other one is a children's book. I wrote a children's book.
Oh wow.
That I, plan on turning that into a brand. Well, not only the books, but I'd like to be able to have, apparel, and I'd like to be able to do animated shorts and, just really kind of build it out as a really robust little brand based on this one particular book. But I have several books. I have one written, but I have another one that's about 3/4 of the way done. And I wrote the first one like during COVID. It's all, it's all illustrated. Everything's all ready to go. I just need to pull the trigger.
That's
So
exciting.
um
It's so much fun. So I think we mentioned this before, but I wrote a book, and from the book, I created a self-paced program. So I've got the academy as well, and my consulting company also implements the methodologies from the book, Destination Employer. So that book can become so much more than a few hundred pages.
wow. Yeah. I love that. Well, that's my plan with this children's book, to have it
Yeah.
become much more than that. And then of course some of the other things, some of the other children's books that I like to do. My plan when I wrote the children's book, like during COVID, I said, you know what? I think I want to try to write a children's book every month. And I have like an incredible illustrator, and he's like, let's go. And I'm like, okay. But then I got busy, and I didn't get around to it. So, but I'm gonna get back to it. There's just so many things that I'd like to be able to do and finish, and but everything just kind of costs, right? You just got to
Yeah.
figure out, where is the low hanging fruit and what makes the most sense, and and then you kind of take it from there.
Yeah, everything has an opportunity cost. Even writing a book, if you already have the tools, there's the time involved, the mental weight. It's so crazy to me, the parallels in our careers, despite being in wildly different industries. You were in fashion, I was in military and technology, but I went from college to Marines to Scotland, so I was in Europe for 3 years. And then, I was an employee for a long time, then a consultant for a number of years, and I started my first company. Now I'm on my second company. We both written books. It's a crazy amount of parallels.
Yeah. Maybe that's the way the parallel flows, when you go from, being an employee to a consultant, and because I actually would like to be able to write more of a business book. Like
Yes, that's what mine is.
I want to write a book about, just about confidence. Right. Because a lot of people ask me, Barb, how did you get to work for, all of those brands? And I said, it's just the confidence in knowing that I could deliver, and I think a lot of times, people focus on, you know, something, it's not going to go well, right? So they don't even bother. But I try to focus on, well, what if it went right? What if it went exactly the way you wanted it to go? And then,
I love that.
having lived through everything with Adidas and have that to go so well, and then kind of snowball and snowball. And I'm like, well, what if it went right? So I ask myself sometimes when I get a little doubty, what if it went right? So I'd love to be able to write a book about confidence and being able to push through like those tough times and that self-talk,
Yes.
to
I
be able to.
in times as uncertain as now, I think that's a great idea and a wonderful addition to the library because, you know, two parts. One, where you put your energy is where you go. So if you're thinking what went right, you're more likely to succeed. On the other part, you mentioned self-talk. I tell people all the time, I do a lot of leadership consulting. I tell leaders all the time, if anyone ever spoke to you the way you speak to yourself, you would fire them at best and commit assault at worst. So think through that. Why do you speak about yourself that way? And then when you do, unsurprisingly, why do you struggle with self-image? Could it be because you insult yourself 23 hours a day? Could that have anything to do with it? So I think that's a wonderful addition.
True.
I will say
It's
this
so
as
true.
well. So when I wrote my book, I worked with a guy named Vincent Lancey. He's a book coach. And he was instrumental because running a consulting company, I don't have a ton of time. So he would basically help me structure things and give me, for lack of a better word, homework. He'd say, okay, Jerry, this is the next piece you have to write. I need it by this time to stay on target. Right. And he'd give me, what I needed to work on. And it was so helpful. It's my ideas from my experience, and I did the writing. But having somebody who's written several books and is a professional coach to guide me along the way got it done so much faster.
Wow. That's good to know. Yeah, share his information with me.
Yeah, well,
I've spoken to a couple of ghostwriters. And that, being creative, certainly a writer is a form of creativity, but it's not the one I got. I could put a business letter together. I do it a lot better now because of ChatGPT.
yeah.
But I feel like I would definitely need someone to kind of hold my hand a lot more and give me, like baby steps. Here's a task. Okay, do this, do this, do this. And how do you eat an elephant, right?
Mm-hmm.
One bite at a time.
For sure.
So that's the way I would need to approach this book.
And so he works everything. So I used him as a coach. All the writing was mine. It was my material from my experience. But he does it straight up through ghostwriting. So he's
Wow.
writing a book for a Boston Red Sox player. He's the whole gamut. So I'll share his info later. But I mentioned it here to say that can be a tool that a busy person like yourself can use to get another project done without it taking up all your time.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it gives me more, give me more credibility because, ideally what I'd like to be able to do is to be I'd like to go, speak at different functions and,
Yes.
Things of that, public speaking. I'd love to do a TED Talk. That's
Yep.
definitely on my list of things to do. And I just think a book would just give me so much credibility.
It really will.
As I do those things.
It really will. It got me invited to dozens of podcasts. The week after next, I'm going to be at Boston Startup Week. And I'll be spending an hour talking about my book on stage. Then I go from that to live recording 4 episodes of the podcast on site with different entrepreneurs there. So a book can be a great entree into the speaking circuit. And I did the speaking circuit for years. It is really starting to freak me out how similar our career paths are winding up. But I did the speaking circuit for years. And from a business consultant, it was invaluable because I was speaking to my target audience for my consulting company about things that were important to them that my consulting company offered services for. So it was such a total win-win for me and for them because obviously, they're getting intel that they want and they're able to see what I'm like to interact with firsthand. So it was incredible.
Yeah.
Plus it's fun.
Wow.
Conferences are fun.
Yeah. 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 I'd like to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I really would.
Sure, with your track record, I have no doubt it's not an if, it's a when.
It's definitely a win. So,
yes.
There's just so many things on my plate that I'd love to be able to do.
That's awesome.
I'm gonna do them.
I think, this feels like a natural ending for me here. So I want to wrap up here and I'd love to have you on the show again. But before we do that, Barbara, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
Well, I am on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. But I feel like LinkedIn is probably the best way to get in contact with me. My Instagram might be the second, which is, Barbara Clarke Ruiz. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the better way.
Awesome. I will include all those links in our show notes. So anybody listening to the show or watching it on YouTube, just click show notes. You'll get links to all Barbara's contact information there. Barbara, I thank you very much for coming on. You've been a wonderful guest. That wasn't a hollow offer. I feel like we could talk for hours and hours, but I'm not Joe Rogan. I keep it under an hour. Thanks again. I really appreciate you being on.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Awesome. Well, folks, until next week when we speak again, continue being awesome and building incredible things.